Kaya Wanju, hello and welcome everyone to Child Protection Week. As you would have seen by the slides that we're just playing, is that the theme this year is every child at every child in every community needs a fair go. And today we wanted to just have a bit of a yarn amongst ourselves, but we want you to also participate. So use the chat button if you can, and you can ask us any questions. Firstly, I am Pam Thorley. I'm the state lead for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island initiatives over here in the West. I am a Noongar Waggle Kep woman. So I come from, this is not my country that I work and live on. I live on Whadjuk country. So if I could acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we're all meeting on today, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And a very, very special shout out to our children, particularly those who are in the out of home care space, and that to let you all know that we're here to support and assist you and those children to have the best opportunities in life. I'm now going to zoom over to Leonie Lippert in Queensland, who's going to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Leonie. Leonie Lippert, State Lead, Queensland for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Initiatives. I am a Torres Strait woman and follow my father's bloodline. So I acknowledge the Arab Dunley people in the Torres Strait, and I'm on Yagara, Turrbal country, here in Brisbane. Thank you. So I'm passing over to Damien, or who am I passing to? Yep, go Damo.
Okay, thank you. So Damien Mick, I'm the territory lead for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Initiatives. So connecting in here from Larrakia country, so up in Darwin. So I'm a Cook Chin Pupialji man, and I'll link in with Billy.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Yes, okay. Yes, it's Billy Gray here. I'm a Kamilaroi fella, born and raised on Bunurong land, which I'm zooming in from as well. So I pay my respects and acknowledge the Bunurong peoples as traditional owners of the land which I'm on, and I acknowledge all the people's traditional lands who people are zooming in from. And yeah, so I'm the state lead for Victoria, and I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't pass on to, sorry. I'll pass on to Katanya.
Yeah, everyone. My name is Katanya Maynard. I'm a Truaway Ghana and Nunajeri woman, and I'm coming to you from Muwanina land around Nicoluna or Hobart in Lutruwita, Tasmania. Although the Muwanina are no longer here due to colonisation, we honour and remember them every single day. I also want to acknowledge and pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander nations and peoples, and I acknowledge and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Ngāi Nina too. Thank you. And I'm going to pass to Shannon. Oh.
Thanks, Katanya. Hi, everyone. Shannon Mackie. I'm a Gumbaynggirr woman from the mid-north coast of New South Wales. I'm zooming in from the beautiful Bundjalung country here in northern New South Wales. And I am the State Manager for Aboriginal Cultural Support and Leadership here in New South Wales. Back to you, Pam, or do I pass to Mark?
Pass to Mark.
Over to you, Mark.
Okay, yeah, hey, Mark Benbarka here. I'm a Lunga person. My mother was taken away. Lunga Halls Creek, central Kimberley. My mother was taken away at 2.5 years, so I grew up in Broome. So I acknowledge that I'm talking to you from Yarra country, Yarra people's country, and I'm honoured to be part of this program we're doing today. And I hope that we can collectively contribute to some positive change for the future in terms of the theme. But yeah, that's me. So
thank you, Mark.
I'm also known as Mary G for those who don't know. So yeah, I look a lot more prettier normally.
Thank you, Mark. So the intent of this was for us to have a bit of a yarn about learning through a cultural lens and the importance of our cultural learning for our kids, and probably to reflect on the past and the current education systems and how they do not meet the needs of our children culturally. So why do we celebrate Child Protection Week, and why is it important to you? I'll throw it open to the floor.
Well, if I may go first then, I guess being part of this, the ultimate abuse of children was the removal of children. And even though that's historical, that culture has permeated and carried on through the generations. So we have a degree of, I'm not sure if the right terminology, but dysfunction generationally because of what happened where people were removed, and identity, language, culture, and who you are is the most important component of who you are as an Indigenous person. And when that's taken away and you're placed in a foreign environment and made to become someone you're not, but your soul still calls out for who you really are. And that trauma continues. And I know for a fact that I carry that same trauma my mother carried, and my children do, and to some degree, my grandchildren. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. But I think it's important that we acknowledge the history and the culture of this country in the abuse of children. And a lot of the stolen generation children were, it delves into the abuse of women because white men were power of authority, and they took advantage of Black women. And some were genuine love, some was abuse, some was to the level of rape and no responsibilities except, and I've got this theory that the pubs was the place where white men of authority and power created laws with their local government and representatives in state and federal parliament to create laws to justify and cover up this crime that was done to our Black women of this country. And the children suffer because of that. That's all I just wanted to add.
Thank you, Mark. Why is it important to, you know, we've got to acknowledge the history and the ongoing intergenerational trauma. But you know, this is about giving kids a fair go this week. How are we going to do that? Was that too hard a question?
No, I'm happy to jump in. So I can share a bit of a story that we've just recently done up in Darwin, where we're looking to do a bit of a consultation about how we can do better, be better for our young people that we support. So I've been working with therapeutic specialists across Darwin, and they've been doing a number of different individual consultations with young people. But then also we set up a different take on it on Sunday afternoon, where we got a bit of a space. We set up a space for us to connect with the young people in a different way. So instead of sitting down in an office and asking these formal questions, inviting it towards a different space where we hosted a fire, and we had the fire space there. We had a setup around the fire, and then we also asked and invited the young people to bring a plate to share. And so we sat there for about 2-3 hours, and one young person literally sat there for about 2 hours just staring into the fire. And so that brings in some of those cultural themes that we've practiced for thousands of years. And you could just show by or see by the young people that they really connected with the space. And then we also had some books and some other games and activities for the young people. But then we also asked the questions that we wanted to reflect on in a different way. So it felt a bit safe, it felt a bit more comfortable, and it led them to really engage into those conversations as well, towards giving these young people a fair go about what it looks like and what it needs to look like as well. But then also being innovative about the ways that we connect with our young people. It doesn't have to be within a space where it's within 4 walls or within a formal environment. We've got to look towards bringing in culture, connecting the country, and really looking at the different ways that we can really connect with our young people so that we can get and capture the voices to better understand what's happening now and to look towards what we can better do to support the future.
And do you think there's some lessons in there for carers in particular who have these kids that they're charged with looking after, for them to be more culturally aware and understand the different learning styles and processes that we have?
Yeah, definitely. I think culture and the many different forms of culture can allow us as people who are caring and connecting with these young people to connect on a different level, even if we're going out to Litchfield, there's a nice water holes, or out having a barbecue in a social environment, connecting with family. It just allows us to connect in a different level, allows us to build a different relationship, and for the young people to see us a bit more differently, to build that trust, to build that that respect, and then the ways of walking in two worlds as well.
Thank you, Damien. Shannon, you're nodding your head and agreeing. Have you got anything you would like to add?
I guess just to back on to what Damien was saying in regards to, you know, working with our kids on their level and having them in an environment that is natural, and it's having that ability to be connected to Mother Earth and to be out around a fire and just sitting in that silence for our kids is going to be so beneficial for them. And yeah, I was just agreeing to you know what Damien's doing up there in the NT around, you know, that cultural connection and that sense of yearning. And as Mark said in his opening, you know, it's your soul calling out for that. So I think with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, especially in the out of home care space, you know, it's an increasing statistic that we're seeing of our kids coming into care. So not only do we as First Nations people have a responsibility, but there's also a responsibility of others in this country to really look at what it is we need to do in this space, and true to the theme, you know, every kid deserves a fair go.
I mean, going on from that, I would say, you know, our children are important regardless of, and all children are important regardless. But for our colleagues, our non-Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander colleagues, need to actually have that experience as well. So hopefully that will grow them in knowing the importance of connecting our kids to country, to sea, to water, to the land, and observe the sky. You know, we had that discussion the other day, Pam, about we forget about the continents and what's up there, and being able to observe who's up there and giving everyone that opportunity. So for our non-Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander colleagues to have that opportunity as well, so hopefully that gives them and grows them to be able to know the importance of connecting our kids back to and understanding where their culture values, you know, those cultural stuff that's really important for them to grow in their culture. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you remembered that connecting. Yeah, I'm glad you remembered that connecting to sky, because I think we were looking at our acknowledgement to country, and we say, you know, we acknowledge the connection to land and sea and water, but we never mention the sky. And that is a really, really important element of our culture. It's where our stories come from. That's where our education comes from, is from those stories and storytelling. Katanya, what's your thinking?
Oh God, we can all agree that we need to make sure that our children have a safe and nurturing environment to grow up in. I have lots of beautiful little people in my life, and for them to succeed and to be happy is one of my biggest wishes. I'm getting a little teary. I was thinking of my little niece. Unfortunately, child protection has in many ways not served our children, their families and our culture. My great-grandmother was a member of the stolen generation, and that trauma has flowed through my family. and she never fully recovered from it. Being severed from your family and culture is one of the greatest pains. And unfortunately, that's not an old pain. It's being felt by so many of our kids now. But what gives me hope is knowing that there are so many people within these services that want to do what they can to help our children and to be there for our children. And they are really craving to learn how to do that. And to give our kids a fair go, we need to meet their needs culturally and do all we can to place our children with their kin, because being surrounded by culture and community and your family is so important, because that love and belonging you feel through your culture and your community is essential in building your identity. I know that it was essential in building mine. And if you take that away from our kids, they're just going to be left with anger and sadness, with nothing around them to help heal and ground them through that. So those are the thoughts that I've had. And I'm sorry for getting a bit teary. I never do that. Oh my God.
Thank you, Tony. No, it's okay to get teary, and as Mark's, highlighted earlier on, that that trauma is still being passed down. So thank you for sharing and being so open and raw. So yeah, and yeah, don't be ashamed of feeling like that, because you nearly made me cry. So, Billy, have you got any thoughts before we switch over to the fabulous Mark Ben Barker?
Oh, in agreement with everything everyone says. For me, the Child Protection Week shines the light on everything we've been mentioning, and for me, raising a child is more than just within one family. It takes a whole community. It's a community effort, and for me, every child is precious and sacred, and yes, the history of child protection for our peoples has been atrocious, and that needs to be fully acknowledged, and that's why it's important for us to be here now to raise these awarenesses. And I fully feel for what Katanya's expressing. I also have that shared experience, as many of us do. I fully am aware of what's going on, and I think we need to make everyone aware of what's been going on. That's my little bit.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for sharing. I now want to hand it over to Mark Ben Barker, who's the chair of the Kimberley Stolen Generation Aboriginal Corporation. If you thought we had big, long titles for our roles in LWB, I think Mark's got a huge title for his corporation. So just wanted to talk a little bit about the corporation, Mark, and the relevance to this week.
Yeah, well, ironically, we're celebrating our next year 21st birthday of the organisation, and so it's been around, and I've been the inaugural chairperson. So I try to retire sometimes, but they won't let me, the oldies. So I'm stuck there for compassionate reasons, for commitment and dedication. But I think I referred to the history of child protection, I guess, and it's it's catch-22, because well, you can brand it anything you like, but at the end of the day, it's the welfare departments. And the key component of child protection in terms of welfare is having the right staff, because there's a lot of I'm sounding a bit radical, but there's a lot of white staff who have superiority thinking of what's right for an Aboriginal child or a Torres Strait Islander child. And as was eloquently said now, that identity, culture, language, and being is very important component. But the other component is family. It is community. It takes a community to raise a child. But most importantly is love. And love is a component that was lost in terms of the stolen generations. They had no love. They were just little machines that were put into institutions and reprogrammed. And if I use an example, I think of this all the time. In the Kimberley, the Catholic Church was dominant in their role in looking after children, or taking children off from, or the government taking off children, and Catholic becoming the minders. But children were flogged for speaking their own language. They were told not to speak their language. They had to speak English, blah, blah, blah. And then when you look at the Lutherans up in Arnhem Land, people there were encouraged to practice their culture, practice their language, and there's another way as well. And hence why we've had the success of Yothi Yindi and all that, because they were able to truly walk in two worlds, to be proud of who they are. And I remember going to an event up in Arnhem Land. What's the festival they have there all the time? I can't think of the name. But yeah, Gama Festival. And I remember I was standing with some people, and they said, gee, these people are, and they were, fellow countrymen, Aboriginal people, they said, gee, these blackfellas are real arrogant, aren't they? And I said, yeah, I said, they are, but I call that arrogance and pride, because they can walk proud of who they are. As we are products of a shame factor, from our parents and grandparents and so on, like that. Hence why I've been very committed and passionate about Kimberley Stolen Generation, because we not only cater for the stolen generations who are now getting thin on the ground because we're losing them, but we're also discovering that the children of and the grandchildren of also carry a gene of lack of confidence and a lack of identity and all this stuff. And we all live in another black man's country. And then when native title kicks in, native title then introduces this thing that if you're not from here, you got no say, and people like myself who grew up in a town like Broome, I respect the traditional owners, but we're the product of government law, and we're all victims of it right across Australia. And so Kimberley Stolen Generation has always been focused on sharing love, open door policy to stolen generation people and other people in the community, because we've learned that at the end of the day, the community is about human love, and we've got to respect and know our history and know where everything came from. But Kimberley Stolen Generation has always been a very powerful force. And just yesterday, I got a acknowledgement from trying to form a Kimberley administrative body. And for the first time, Kimberley Stolen Generation has been included in that as a regional representative body. As usually, it always was stolen generations, they chucked on one side type of thing. So our impact on the community as a whole has been phenomenal. And the other reason is that Kimberley Stolen Generation is about making sure that the children of stolen generation people or grandchildren of always know the story and of where they came from, what happened, and how they live in a place that they don't, where you adopt another culture, another language. I've inherited 3 grandchildren because from 9 years old down, because my son struggles as a single father, and his wife is struggles as well as a mother. So my wife Tanya and myself have to step up and take responsibility and protect our children, to the point of even getting another mortgage to buy a house so that they got a home they live in, because a home is a very important component of the success of the child, and also a safe home. And I said to one of my the 9-year-old granddaughter, well, now you're going to get your own home. Now you'll have to go back and live with Dad. And she stops and she thinks and she says, but can I come back here on the weekends? Children need a safe home. They need routine. They need love, meals, believe it or not, proper meals, and support and encouragement. And most importantly, injecting. One of them said to me, oh, Dad. And I said, I'm not your dad. I'm your grandfather. Oh, sorry. It was just a mechanism of using the terminology because they were in a home environment and they loved going to school, and they encouraged. My wife was very strict on getting up early, having a shower, going to bed early, sorry, getting up early, having a shower, having breakfast and going to school. And those kids run off to school. They love going to school. So we've ingrained into them the importance of going to school and being proud of who you are. And everything else is part of who you are. And Kimberley Stolen Generation has kind of encouraged that sort of behavior. But it's really hard when you've got welfare who interferes sometimes, and they interfere in a bad way, even though it's devil if you do, devil if you don't, because we see kids who are totally neglected. And they're neglected because their parents are dysfunctional, and because those parents have been dysfunctional because their parents were taken away and stolen. They weren't taught motherhood, weren't taught fatherhood, weren't taught how to have a family. You know, they didn't even know how to love. I remember saying to my mother, I love you. Ah, you talk rubbish. You know, she couldn't handle the word love, you know. And to me, that's the most important component of who we are as humans, is that we show love, we show respect. And I drive that, and I give that leadership through Kimberley Stolen Generation, that it's important that not only people know their identity and who they are and where they come from, but they must pass that down to their children and grandchildren, because that's the only way you're going to turn things around and empower our community as a whole. And so the relevance to the week for me and for Kimberley Stolen Generation is about those points, that kids need a safe home. And I always say to my wife, and I always say to my son, don't trust nobody. Don't trust nobody, because you've got to be vigilant all the time, watching, because how many times have we heard about that horrible thing of sexual abuse and so on, that stuff is what shuts those young people's brains down. You know, we've got to let them flow open up like a flower, and be a beautiful person to become a fantastic citizen within the community, with all the richness of discipline, upbringing, growing up, school, attendance, food, and love. And I don't know if I should go on there, Pam, but that's my theory of what Kimberley Stolen Generation stands for. And I think love is the most important component. And the other thing that I just wanted to add is people in welfare, non-Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people, don't understand that we are inclusive with our family and our kin and our relations. It's all one. As Western culture generally says, oh, well, they're just cousins. We don't say cousins. We don't have cousins. We have mums and dads, brothers and sisters. And that's the difference. And when kids grow up with that, that gives them a sense of richness of who they are as a person, as a human being. You know? And for me, the week is really, and I see it around me all the time, the failure of, dare may I say, families or structures or society in the neglect. At the moment, in the Kimberley, we've got youth who are running amok, stealing cars, burning cars, breaking and entry. And when I take go for my night rides, we take our dog for a night ride, we see these kids who are really small, 9-year-old kids walking the streets. And I say to my wife, you know why they're walking the streets? And she says, why? Because they're safe on the streets. They're not safe at home. And that's the issue there, that parents haven't been given the right to discipline because welfare have taken that away. And you'd have heard a lot of our elders, all of us, say it was hard times when our old people say that. You know, it was hard times. We grew up hard times, but those hard times made them richer and stronger, mentally, physically, and spiritually.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Oh, I think there's some feedback happening there. No, thank you. And I want to bring it back to education, because here at Life Without Barriers, education outcomes for our children and young people, particularly in the out-of-home care space, is a key driver in our 2025 strategy. But when you talk about trauma and the impact that has, then that obviously affects a child's ability to learn and to learn to read and to learn to write. And so the importance of books, and we have a program here called Hook into Books, which is an education program which we recently established, and they've been doing a bit of work up in the Kimberley mark, up with Mugaballa Books, who have generously donated, at a small fee, books for our book suitcases that we can access and give to kids, and we try to make sure that involves their culture, so that all those issues about identity and knowing culture, and that they need to see those books too and be proud of it. If a child is really traumatized and they're in our care, in the out-of-home care space, how do we culturally support them?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, look, we have books in our house non-stop, all kinds of books, and our grandchildren love reading, and they're right into it, and we encourage it all the time. And the other component, as I said earlier, is education, school. Our youngest grandson is still struggling with diction. He still struggles, and the other, his sister, older, she interprets for us. So he'll say something to me and I'll go, what's he saying? And she'll come along and interpret it. It's like bilingual stuff, that's going on. But yes, we encourage books in particular, and we have a lot of books here. The other thing, and I don't know if it's important or whether it's bad or not, is all these television shows. I mean, they go on to Netflix and stuff like that, and they watch all these cartoons that's got these moral messages in them, and they love it, and they'll sit for hours and watching it, and all those characters come from books, so they connect the two together, But I think I agree with you that books is important. My middle granddaughter is a very, very talented person. She comes home from school, does art, always drawing. She's left-handed on top of that. But she's going to be an artist. Well, what is she going to be? I don't know, but that's all she does. She just draws and writes, and is her diction and writing, she'll get a book and staple it together and make her own books, and write messages in it, I think that's all part of the wiring of the brain, reading books, comprehending their environment, and being part of their confidence building, because their confidence is what's going to drive them through, and not allowing anybody to shut that down in them, because they have to prosper and they have to open up like a flower, and that comes through time and through encouragement of the home environment.
Yep, great, thank you. I'm going to open it up to the panel now. Any comments, any questions? Yep, Tanya.
It's one of the reasons I really liked Hooked into Books, just ever since it I found out about it and got to be on some of the early meetings and got to be involved, is I was a massive reader, I still am. And one of the things for me is I grew up in a home with all my brothers and my mum and my dad. I'm very thankful, and I come from a very privileged position in that way. But that, unfortunately, what that didn't protect me was from people still misunderstanding who I was as a person, being one of the only Aboriginal kids at my very, very white school. And all of the kind of other stuff that's happened in my life. And books was not only something that was a fun thing for me to do and I loved, but it was actually a way for me to escape in a healthy manner. It was this just little tool that I could pick up, and all of a sudden I was able to focus on something that just wasn't my life. And I remember the times where I wasn't reading books were the time when I was getting into scraps in the schoolyard, when I was very, very angry little person. But when I was reading, I was calm, and I had just this way to process my emotions in a healthy way, because not every child has access to mental health services and or someone to talk to or feel comfortable to talk about their feelings. So having an outlet where you don't have to talk about it, but it still helps, is really good. So I think books are great for your learning, but they're also really good for your health up here. And so, yeah.
Yep. Totally agree.
And nowadays we have the beauty of audible books. So, you know, if you don't want to read them and make your eyes sort of fall out of your head, get someone else to read them to you. Stop laughing, Pam. It's a good way of resting your eyes, is letting someone else read to you, and you actually take it on better. But how do we encourage our kids to read? You know, our books got to be books where there's more pictures than words. So our kids can tell their own story about what that story is supposed to be, to make it easier for them to be able to, like Tanya said, you know, to escape from what's actually happening. And, you know, a lot of our kids have that opportunity, but, you know, they get in trouble for reading when they should be doing every other chore that you can think of. But so how do we encourage our young people to read more? And I think it's showing by example. You know, we read to them, maybe they'll read back to us. And it's just taking the time to stop and do it, because we don't do it enough. Really, we don't. We're too busy doing everything else, but stopping to think, to read, to look, to share what you're reading. I have a 15-year-old grandson that's read every Harry Potter book. And it's like, Gran, I'm going to tell you the story. You know, you're watching the movie and he's telling you the story. And it's like, take the book off him, hide the books. But he, you know, that's his thing. He will sit in his room. If you don't let him have his video game, he will read. So how do we encourage kids to more read from a very young age, that they'll learn the appreciation of? Katanya?
I honestly feel like one of the amazing things we have in this day and age is there's more books that, and even TV shows that actually have people like our kids in them. They have Aboriginal kids, or they have young children of colour that are heroic and don't need to rely on, they show strength and resilience. And I feel like if we encourage our kids to read these stories where they can see a part of themselves in it, I think that transition into reading could be a lot easier. That's just my opinion.
Damien, any thoughts?
Yeah, from I guess a territory perspective, and I think a lot of our communities and elders historically had a negative view on the educational system because it was forcefully imposed on them. And so that reflected onto our young people as well. But I think over time, there's been a shift now where a lot of our elders are very supportive because the schools are working alongside our leaders. And I can reflect on a story directly from Wadair. So I used to live there in a remote community called Wadair. It's also known as Port Keats. I speak Miran Pata. So I stayed there for about a year. And I seen the transition and shift of that, where the schools were working with families, where they were trying to link in with some local interpreters, the family connections, link in with kinship as well to really support a solid foundation for the young people connecting into the schools so that they felt supported, mentored, coached throughout their education journey. And so that really grew and grew and grew. And so last year, the first time ever, 5 young people, and this is over the 5 years, since they started that shift on their learning journey. And like we said before, it takes a community to really support these young people linking in towards these supports. And so, yeah, so last year, I think it was a year or two ago, first time ever, 5 young people have completed year 12 in Whaddere. And it's been a shift. So it's been a community shift, and all the families, all the community were involved in this process. And I think it leads back to our young people in care as well. Is like, if they don't have that foundational support, I think it's challenged, and there's a lot of disruptions for themselves to focus on certain things. So those are the sort of things that we need to look at when we're supporting young people in this space. It's not just about the vision of us wanting them to have a good education. It's also about acknowledging some of the other disruptions they have, and really supporting them on that journey so that we can really look towards their goals and aspirations.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question earlier. Oh, sorry, Mark.
No, I was just going to say, I think also Damien is touched on, it's got to be relevant to those kids as well. Things that's relevant to them as who they are, because, well, I know I keep going back on history, but history tells us a lot, is that we were told that we were inferior and blah, blah, blah. And we've got to reverse that so that the children, well, we've done that to a degree, but also we're in a different era where these young school kids are very switched on with technology, amazingly switched on, you know. I've got an uncle over in Derby who gives his mobile phone to his granddaughter to fix it. And she's only a little thing, you know. And I said, you trust her with the phone? He said, yeah, she'll fix it. And she fixes it for him. So we collectively come from a different era to these young kids today, where technology and information is more exposed to them, where we had to learn something, they're almost born with it. You know, it's in them. And I think we should encourage that as well, in terms of their own confidence of using, not so much technology, but technology is the component, but it's about knowledge, their knowledge. And when you see cartoons of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people acting, that's relevant to them, and they connect to that straight away. Yeah. Sorry, Pam.
No. That's fine. Shannon, you've been very quiet today. Have you got any comments? Anything you'd like to let people know?
Yeah, I have been a little bit quiet today. I've just been enjoying the yarn that's been had by everyone on the panel. I think for me, probably going back to Leonie's question in regards to how do we encourage our kids to read or pick up a book. I think one of the things that I found is, you know, there's a bit of that shame component too, that when our kids pick up a book and their parent may not have you know, the literacy to actually understand what it is that they're trying to read, there's also that barrier too that I think that we really haven't touched on is, you know, we can encourage our kids to pick up books, and we can encourage our kids to learn and to educate and build safety and protective factors, but there's also that disconnect between their family and their parents as well. So I've seen it when I've done supervised contacts with our kids, and they've come into a family time visit with their parent, and you know, they want to show them what they've learned at school, and they want to show them what they've done, and you can see that hesitation from some of the parents where they're like, oh, I don't know what to do here because I don't know what it is they're trying to talk about. So I think it's one of those things that there's a bit of co-education here, in a sense of really picking and building our kids' capacities in this space, but also there's that space of learning and growth that some of our parents may need to do in this space, and we have to walk that journey with them. So that's probably, you know, kind of what resonated with me with Leonie's prompt in regards to how can we encourage and entice our kids. There's also that, and what we need to do and help our parents in that space as well.
Yep. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of it, so that's a good angle. I know last week was Indigenous Literacy Day, and there was an alarming stat that was, that I read, which was that 36% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Year 5 students in very remote areas are at or above national minimum reading level standards, compared to 96% for non-Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students in major cities. So you can see there's this huge gap. And you know, what do you think some of the barriers? Why are we there with those alarming stats?
I think it's the curriculum that's set. I think it sets a standard that's not culturally appropriate. So as I reflect back to my time working in remote across the Northern Territory, a lot of the language that was used wasn't reflective of the local environment. So that's why I said that shift was necessary to work alongside some interpreters, some elders, some traditional owners, to really connect them into that space, so that because our young people are speaking up to 2 to 3 different languages, especially up in the NT, where it's very still very strong, the language, which is really good to see. And these young people are speaking 2 to 3 different languages. English is only introduced when they're coming into the schools. So before that, their learning is mostly cultural. And so I think that's a lot of the struggle when they're coming into the space. Their understanding of language isn't the reading or writing around English, and they're still trying to catch up within that space. And I think there's not a lot of foundational supports out remote, and there needs to be more. But yeah, I think I have seen a shift, and it's really growing and strengthening. But I think that's one of the things as well, even university as well, it sets you to be a standard at a certain degree. And if you can't, and I even struggle throughout uni as well, but those are the sort of standards the curriculum sets, but I don't think are reflective of other people's learnings and other people's cultures as well.
I think I could concur with what you just said, Damien, because my father came from Singapore and he couldn't read and write. So he had limited English. My mother had very basic education, being taken away and growing up in an orphanage. So the transfer of comprehension, or to be able to speak succinct English, is a challenge. It was a challenge for me. And even reading, absorbing what you read, to absorb that into your brain, hold it there, because I never grew up with that guidance, because my mother and father could only do what they could do. And that was limited. And then going to school, you always felt like you were a bit behind all the time, So you had to fight hard to try and achieve. And the way you achieve is by dreaming about being something, or dreaming to want to do something. And that's why sport is generally one of the favored aspects, or the arts, for a lot of our young kids. It's because to some degree, maybe it's the understanding of English. Like you say, kids go home and they speak 2 or 3 different tribal languages, then they got to go to school and catch up. And I think that can be sometimes an obstacle as well. And but I concur with that. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
I think there's so many things outside of school, outside of the actual classroom, that affects what happens in the classroom. It's the systemic issue of parents not having the tools that they need, and that they should have a right to have, those rights being taken away from them from whatever trauma they have in their lives. And so, mum and dad may be struggling with really bad depression, or it could be just mum or just dad. So then that affects what the kids are having to eat in the morning for breakfast, whether or not they get to school. And when they get to school, and these kids could be experiencing trauma, on top of not seeing themselves reflected within the curriculum that they're learning, and their languages are not being reflected in that either. On top of everything, there's no one within the classroom that is trauma informed and able to be on their level and understand where they're coming from. I worked in education for years and have seen that people have the best of intentions and want the best for their students, teachers or teaching assistants, principals, but if they're not trauma informed and have extra assistance in classrooms for children with extra needs, then the children are just kind of left to try and figure it out on their own if they don't understand something, especially when our classrooms are always over capacity. You know, something needs to change because the education system is just being stretched and stretched and stretched like a rubber band for non-Aboriginal kids. So then our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids are just being forgotten about. And it's not fair. It's not fair. And our kids know it's not fair. So if they feel that they're not being given a fair go, then why are they going to try?
Yeah, true. Yeah. And I think that, you know, when you look at child protection and one of the key things that they look at is the child's attendance at school. But if they're being challenged at school, then they're going to shy away from school as much as they can. So it is right about turning it on its head and getting the parents supported and capable of, you know, getting their kids to school and supporting them when they come home from school as well. But we need to be supporting the parents, as Shannon said earlier. So yeah, we've got to turn it on its head. And I think through our leadership piece with the proposed Elevate RAP, that we you know, that's the way that Life Without Barriers is thinking. So it's hopefully we'll get some traction in that area.
Yeah.
I probably want to wrap up now, except just to probably ask Mark if he has any closing comments for us.
I guess thinking about what the solutions are is challenging because as Indigenous people, all the points that was made is up against us, and that's not an excuse. It's a reality. You know, when you watch the news and you hear the Indigenous news stuff or whatever it may be, children they absorb what's being said in their home environment. And when grandma, grandfather, or dad, or mum, or whoever's going off on television about the treatment of Aboriginal people or black deaths in custody or whatever it is, they absorb all that, and they're sponges because that enhances their blackness, I guess, about what the challenges are out there in the world. And somehow we've got to find a way or think of a way that allows them to understand all this stuff, understand the history, but don't let it control you. Because once you let that control you, then it becomes depressive and suppressive, and stumps people's ability to learn and grow and become individuals. You know, if you look at Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children who grew up in a very secure, disciplined environment, they go on to university and all this other stuff. The ones that grew up in a poverty environment, they struggle. And we've got to be conscious of that. And I think the system needs to be conscious of that, that at the end of the day, a safe home and a home that has routine, discipline and so on is the key to the success of our children. And of course, going to school. But also, most importantly, recognizing who that person is in terms of their culture, their language, where they come from, who their people are, and all that. So they grow up fully fulfilled with knowledge that's important to who they are as humans, but most importantly, who they are in society, in our communities, you know? Yeah.
Thank you, Mark, for those closing comments. We haven't got the solutions, but I suppose that again is about empowering the voices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the community, within our organisation, and within our families, to ensure that they have, are a part of the solution, not the problem.
Yeah.
So I would like to thank you all for being online today. A particular special thanks to Mark for sharing your stories and learning a little bit more about the Kimberley Stolen Generation Aboriginal Corporation. So we're very grateful for your contribution today. This week there is further webinars on, I think Dale Murray from the Education Unit will be online on panel. So please tune into that too. And thank you all very much and have a great week.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
See you later.